the hotel room hummed faintly with city sounds, traffic sighing in the distance, a neon light flickering outside the half-drawn curtains. Everything felt suspended, like time had decided to move slower inside those four walls. Ava sat on the edge of the bed, brushing her hair with absent motions, her reflection fractured in the cheap rectangular mirror. It had been the longest night of my life. Dad's heart scare had brought us here, a sterile hospital room, cold coffee in paper cups, a nurse's distant voice repeating words like stable and monitoring overnight. I should have been relieved. I was, but the relief was tangled in exhaustion and something heavier, something that pressed on my chest like an invisible hand. When Ava booked the hotel, she didn't look at me. "It's the only one nearby," she said quietly, fingers trembling on her phone screen. Just one room left. Now, that one room had become our entire world for the night. The bed was a king-sized expanse of white sheets, the kind that never felt truly clean. I had laid down first, still in my jeans, staring at the ceiling as if it might offer instructions on how to breathe normally again. I'd put a pillow in the middle, a line that divided us, safe and sensible. She came in after her shower, the air filling with the faint scent of jasmine lotion. It was the same scent that used to linger in the hallway at home, subtle, comforting, but tonight it hit differently. The mattress dipped when she climbed in. A small shift, but enough for my heart to stumble. Neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't empty, it was full of the things we'd never said in 7 years of forced politeness. I could hear her breathing, slow but uneven, like she was awake too, pretending not to be. Ava had always been a mystery to me, too graceful, too composed. When she married my father, I was 16 and angry at the world. She'd tried to bridge the gap, buying me books, asking about school, complimenting things she didn't understand. But beneath it all, there had always been something. I used to catch her watching me, like she was remembering something, or someone else. Her eyes would linger a second longer than they should, her smile soft, but unreadable. And I'd tell myself it was in my head, because the alternative was too strange to name. Tonight, though, there was no pretending the air wasn't charged. I turned away, facing the window, tracing the reflections of headlights moving across the ceiling. The city felt too alive for how still the room was. The pillow between us felt like a fragile dam, and I wasn't sure which one of us it was holding back. I thought of my father asleep a few miles away, of the way Ava had sat beside him in the hospital, holding his hand, her face calm and devoted. There was no doubt she loved him, but I had started to wonder, over the years, if she loved him the way one loves safety, not passion. And what did that make me? I'd spent years building quiet walls around my emotions, pretending that the strange electricity between us didn't exist. But tonight, exhaustion had stripped me bare. When I closed my eyes, I could see flashes, her hand helping me zip up my graduation dress, the moment her fingers grazed my skin, her voice low as she said, "You've grown up so fast." It wasn't a compliment. It was something else, something unspoken, hovering in the air between us for years. Now it was here, breathing beside me, in the dark. The sound of fabric shifting broke the silence. The pillow moved, not abruptly, but slowly, almost uncertainly, like the tide creeping over the shore. I froze. The logical part of me screamed, "Stay still, pretend to be asleep, don't make this real." But my body betrayed me. My breath hitched, my hand twitched, brushing against her arm. Her skin was warm. That tiny touch, accidental or not, was enough to undo every barrier I had ever built. I didn't turn around, neither did she, but I knew we were both awake, suspended in the same unbearable truth that something had shifted and nothing would ever be the same again. I could feel her heartbeat, faint but real, through the thin layer of air and linen between us. It wasn't lust. It wasn't even comfort. It was recognition of loneliness, of yearning, of the strange, unchosen bond that had grown between us in the quiet corners of our lives. I thought of what people would say if they saw us now, the names they'd call us, the lines they'd draw. But those people weren't here. Only us, and the weight of everything unsaid. The night stretched endlessly. I don't know when I finally drifted into sleep, but when I woke, the first light of dawn was spilling through the blinds. The pillow was gone, and Ava was still asleep, her hair falling across her face, her hand inches from mine. For a second, I just looked at her, really looked. The woman who had always felt like a stranger suddenly looked so human, so breakable. Something inside me ached. Not desire exactly, but something deeper. A wish that the world allowed softness in the places it forbade it most. When she stirred, I closed my eyes and turned away again, pretending to sleep. She whispered my name once, quietly, like a prayer, and then she got up, gathering her things, careful not to make a sound. We didn't speak that morning, but the silence between us had changed. It was no longer polite distance, it was memory. And once something becomes memory, it never truly goes away. The drive home the next morning was wrapped in silence. Outside, the world had already returned to its rhythm, the blur of cars, the hum of the highway, sunlight slipping through the clouds like nothing extraordinary had ever happened. But inside the car, time moved differently. Dad sat in the passenger seat, his wrist still wrapped with a hospital band, reading through his discharge papers. He looked pale, fragile in a way I'd never seen before. Every so often, he'd glance out the window, lost in thought. Ava drove. Her hands were steady on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the road. Her wedding ring caught the light, glinting like a reminder of everything that still bound her, and of everything that shouldn't have happened. I sat in the back seat, staring at the back of her head. Every mile that passed between the city and home felt like a slow unraveling of what had happened last night. But no matter how many exits we passed, it didn't fade. The silence wasn't peace, it was pressure. When we reached the house, sunlight had softened into late afternoon gold. The walls felt unchanged, the framed pictures, the faint smell of coffee, the echo of normal life, and yet everything inside me had shifted. I went upstairs, unpacked my overnight bag, and sat on my bed, waiting for the noise of dishes clinking downstairs to ground me. I thought if I listened hard enough, I could convince myself that the world hadn't tilted. But then she knocked. A soft, uncertain tap. "Come in," I said, my voice thinner than I meant it to be. Ava stepped inside, still in the same clothes from the drive. Her hair was pinned up loosely, strands falling free. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then she took a breath, the kind you take before saying something that might break you. She said it softly. "About last night." My stomach dropped. Her voice cracked slightly, but she forced a smile. "We were both exhausted. It was, a lot. Let's just forget it, okay?" Forget it. The words landed like a dull blade. I nodded again, pretending that was possible, that the silence we'd shared, the electric pulse of what didn't happen, could somehow be erased by willpower. She waited, maybe for me to say something, to deny it or agree, but I stayed quiet. When she left the room, she closed the door gently. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. My heart hurt, not because of guilt, but because I understood her too well. She wasn't trying to erase it for herself. She was doing it for him, for the life she'd built on steadiness and predictability, for the man sleeping downstairs who had no idea that the woman he loved and the daughter he raised were both pretending nothing had shifted. That night, I couldn't sleep.
The house was too quiet, the walls too thin. I could hear the faint sound of the TV in their bedroom, the murmur of a movie, the occasional laugh from my dad's recovering voice. Ava's softer laughter followed practiced, perfect. I turned onto my side, facing the window, and whispered to no one, I don't want to forget. The next few days were a blur of pretending. I helped Dad with his meds, cooked meals, asked about his work. Ava and I exchanged polite smiles, careful not to hold eye contact for too long. But the tension, that invisible thread between us, pulled tighter. One evening, I came home late from a friend's house. The living room lights were off, but I could see the faint glow of the kitchen. She was there, standing at the sink, washing a glass slowly, lost in thought. Hey, I said, softly. She turned, startled. Her face softened when she saw it was me. You're home early. It's almost midnight. She smiled faintly, shaking her head. Guess I lost track of time. For a while, neither of us spoke. The air was thick with unsaid things. Then she turned off the faucet and leaned against the counter. How are you holding up? I'm okay. You've always been stronger than you think. Her voice trembled slightly on the last word. It wasn't just comfort. It was something closer to confession. Before I could respond, she crossed her arms, suddenly defensive. I shouldn't say things like that. I don't want to confuse you. I'm not confused, I said quietly. The silence that followed was the same as in the hotel. Heavy, waiting. Ava exhaled, long and shaky. You should go to bed. I nodded, but didn't move. She started toward the hallway, then stopped. Her hand lingered on the door frame. Some things, she said, without turning around, are easier to live with if we never name them. And then she walked away. Her footsteps faded down the hall. That night, I cried quietly, not out of guilt or shame, but because I finally understood the shape of what I felt and how impossible it was. It wasn't lust, it wasn't rebellion, it was a strange kind of love. Inconvenient, forbidden, but real. It was the love that forms between two lonely people who find in each other a reflection they can't admit to anyone else. Over the next few weeks, life returned to normal, at least on the surface. My father recovered, the hospital bills were paid, and dinner conversations filled with laughter again. But something unspoken lived in the quiet moments, when Ava's hand brushed mine while passing a plate, or when her eyes met across the room. Every time it was there, that flicker of understanding, that ache of recognition. Sometimes I caught her watching me when she thought no one noticed, and every time I pretended not to see. It wasn't about denial anymore. It was about survival. Because I knew, deep down, that if either of us reached out, even once, the life we knew would crumble. And yet, I couldn't stop wondering what would happen if it did.
Summer arrived like a quiet forgiveness. Long days, warm light, everything washed in gold. From the outside, nothing had changed. Our house still smelled of coffee in the mornings, of jasmine at night. My father's laughter once again filled the rooms like music. And yet, every sound seemed to echo differently. Ava and I had mastered the art of pretending. We spoke about groceries, my classes, the weather, everything safe, everything ordinary. But beneath every conversation ran an invisible current. It was in the way she looked away too quickly when our eyes met, the way her voice softened when she said my name, the way silence always lingered just a second too long. Sometimes I caught her staring out the window, eyes unfocused, lips parted like she was about to say something but changed her mind. I'd stand there, frozen, wondering what would happen if I just said, I know. But I never did. One evening, after dinner, my father went to bed early. Ava stayed behind, clearing the table. I started to help, stacking plates, avoiding for gaze. Our hands brushed over a glass. Just a touch, but enough to make both of us pause. Her breath caught, mine did too. When I finally looked up, she wasn't moving, just watching me, eyes full of something fragile and dangerous. "Do you ever think about it?" I whispered. She didn't ask what I meant. She didn't need to. Her shoulders rose, fell, a deep breath that sounded like surrender. Every day.
The words hit like a heartbeat, real, simple, undeniable. But before I could speak again, she turned back to the sink, her voice steadier now. "But I also think about what it would destroy." I swallowed hard. "It's already destroyed, isn't it? The pretending." She closed her eyes. "You think love is enough to make something right. It isn't." There was no anger in her voice, only ache, the kind that comes from knowing you want something you can never have. We didn't talk after that. Instead, the summer stretched on in strange, quiet harmony. We moved around each other like ghosts who remembered being alive, still drawn together, but careful never to touch. And yet, every moment felt charged. The world outside kept turning. Friends, college plans, birthdays. But here, inside this house, time seemed suspended in that single night at the hotel when the pillow between us had been pushed away. That night had never ended. It had just grown quieter. In late August, I decided to move out. It wasn't sudden, just inevitable. Dad was healthy again, strong enough to go back to work. The world didn't need me here anymore. But part of me knew that if I stayed, something between Ava and me would eventually break. When I told her, she didn't look surprised, just sad. "You've been ready for a while," she said softly. "I don't want to leave like this." She smiled, the kind of small, tired smile that hurts more than tears. There's no other way. We packed my things in silence. She helped fold my clothes, her hands brushing the edges of fabric like they were made of glass. When we reached the last box, she hesitated. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a tiny silver pendant, one I'd seen her wear for years, a simple heart worn smooth with time. She pressed it into my hand. "For when you forget how strong you are." I looked at her, trying not to cry. "Ava!" She whispered, "Don't! If you say my name like that, I'll never let you go." So I didn't. We just stood there, the air heavy between us. Everything we wanted to say hung unsaid. Finally, she stepped back, her voice trembling. "You should go before he wakes up." I nodded, picked up my keys. My throat burned, my chest tight. At the door, I turned one last time. She was standing by the kitchen table, hands clasped, eyes shining, but dry. And I realized she wasn't breaking. She was choosing loyalty, choosing silence, choosing him. I wanted to hate her for it, but I couldn't, because I was choosing too. Months passed. College started. New city, new friends, new noise. But sometimes at night, I'd wake up thinking I smelled jasmine. I'd reach for that pendant, the one she'd given me, and feel its warmth against my palm. I'd think of her hands, her voice, that night in the hotel when a pillow wasn't enough to keep the truth out. And though I never said it aloud, I knew what we shared wasn't a mistake. It was a moment that changed everything, not because it was forbidden, but because it was real. Real in the way the air changes before a storm. Real in the way you can't unsee something once your heart recognizes it. We loved each other, just at the wrong time, in the wrong way, bound by the wrong promises. But love doesn't care about rules. It only asks to be remembered. So I did. I remembered her every time I smelled jasmine, every time sunlight hit glass just so, every time a quiet room felt too full of meaning. And I knew that even though the line had been erased, even though the pillow was gone for good, some part of her would always live in the spaces between what was said and what wasn't.